Welcome back, everybody, to the Fretboard Journal podcast. I am your host, Jason Verlinde, the publisher of the Fretboard Journal magazine. Hopefully you know 2025 marks the 20th anniversary of the Fretboard Journal print magazine. Our 57th issue is out now. Our 58th issue is going to be going to press in just a couple of weeks, and we think this is a perfect time for you to join us if you haven't yet. So go to fretboardjournal.com, click on the subscribe button. We focus on journalism and guitar storytelling and interviews you're not going to find in any other media outlet. And to do it, we need our subscribers. So please be a part of the Fretboard Journal family. It makes for a great gift as well. And today's guest on this very podcast has been a longtime member of the Fretboard Journal family. Paul Burch was one of our earliest contributors. He interviewed Duane Eddy for one of our earliest issues. And in addition to being a Fretboard Journal writer and a music producer and a singer-songwriter, we can now say Paul Burch is a novelist because he just wrote this incredible piece of historical fiction on the life of Jimmie Rodgers. It's called Meridian Rising. It is written as though it's a long-lost memoir of Jimmie Rodgers, and today on the show, we hear all about it, why Paul took on this audacious undertaking, some of the fun facts about Jimmie Rodgers that maybe most of us didn't know, and why Paul thought he was just the perfect subject for this book. Paul also has a brand new record out. We talk about that and a whole bunch of other projects. It's always fun catching up with Paul Burch. Before we get to my interview, I just want to thank our sponsors. They are Stringjoy Strings out of Nashville, Tennessee. Go to stringjoy.com. Tell them the Fretboard Journal sent you. By using the discount code Fretboard when you check out, you'll get 10% off your first order of any guitar, mandolin, or banjo strings over there. We're also brought to you by Peghead Nation, my friends in California, creating one of the coolest music instruction portals around. Again, use that discount code Fretboard when you check out. You can get your first month free over on Peghead Nation. So many past, present, and future Fretboard Journal subjects are teaching over there. It's quite the array of instructors, and I know you will love it. And then last, but definitely not least, our friends at Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar here in Seattle, Washington are sponsoring the show. If anyone ever finds themselves in Seattle, A, take me out for a beer. B, go over to Mike and Mike's in the Fremont neighborhood. See their ever-rotating array of vintage guitars, synths, amps, pedals, you name it. They've got the cool made-in-Japan Fender stuff and so much more. And they have a full-service repair and restoration shop as well. You can just go to mmguitarbar.com and see their entire lineup of guitars and everything else if you can't make it to Seattle. And by all means, do tell them the Fretboard Journal sent you. All right, those are my housekeeping notes. Fretboard Summit 2026 registration is now open at fretboardsummit.org. Go sign up. It's our annual guitar festival in Chicago, taking place at the Old Town School of Folk Music in August. And without further ado, here is my conversation with the one and only Paul Burch. Paul Burch, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me.
20 years ago, you wrote for the Fretboard Journal.
I know. Let's see. It was a Duane Eddy interview with Richard Bennett, which was terrific.
Yeah.
And then I also interviewed David Rawlings. Right. Was those my two publications?
I think so.
I think so. Yeah.
It's been 20 years, so don't quote me on that.
Days.
I've been thoroughly enamored with your music for 20 plus years. I mean, going back to, you were in Lamb Chop and then you WPA Ball Club and all that good stuff. You've put out two very noteworthy things this year, and I want to talk to you about both of those, but maybe for folks who are listening to this who aren't familiar with you, describe let's try to describe what you're trying to achieve musically, because it is this throwback retro sound, but the songs are original. I don't know. I'm going to hand it to you. Tell people what you do.
I'd call it rhythm music, really. American rhythm, the American beat. I love tangos and swing and rock and roll and R&B. I grew up in the 1970s and 80s when the radio was still somewhat independent. And I grew up on the East Coast around the Washington, D.C. area. So there were a lot of touring bar bands. If you think of the E Street Band as the band that made it, there's a whole score of bands that toured all up and down the East Coast, like NRBQ, the Nighthawks, Evan Johnson, the H-Bombs, Tex Rabinowitz and the Bad Boys, of which great Eddie Angel was a guitar player in that when he was like 19 or 20. He's my friend now. So I grew up like surrounded by rock and roll and rhythm and blues and country, like good country music, as well as there were two record collectors who lived in the DC area, one named Joe Buzzard and one named Dick Spotswood, who are revered names in the world of 78 collectors. And they both had shows. So I don't remember what day they played on, but randomly I would hear the New Grape Twins, I Got Your Ice Cold New Grape, or Charlie Patton or Robert Johnson actually on the radio because they were playing these songs on the radio. And so I guess my music is, I don't think about genres. I got started in Nashville playing honky tonk country in an old bar that's now not so old, but an old bar called Tootsie's, which had been around for a long time. But I don't think of it as retro. I try not to get too up in arms about that. But it's like it is in the sense that age of rock and roll bands touring clubs is over. I mean, it's not. I mean, plenty of bands play in clubs, but rock and roll, made by kids who had to sneak the radio under their pillow, because that music was not welcome in their house. The people who had to grow up that way and played and made bands doing that stuff, that was a time when you had to look to find it in the pre-CD era. A lot of American rock and roll, rhythm and blues, country western was out of print. So that's the era that I grew up in, where you really had to find this music and find a community of people who knew it. I don't know if that describes myself, but that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's just like, to me, it's all different, but it's American music has a kind of groove, a kind of attack. It's like, it's really hitting you. Mm-hmm. And also that was a time when people were writing and may only have one chance to be heard, so a 3-minute song, especially if you ever get a chance to listen to, early Louis Armstrong or Fletcher Henderson or any of that, like those records, there is so much energy in one 3-minute record because they had to get you like right away. Yeah. So that's kind of my thought. I write the best words that I can, but musically I'm trying to really play every song as if it might be the only tune you get to hear.
That's awesome. When in this journey, I mean, you've just rattled off a whole bunch of bands and names that people should go check out if they haven't yet. At what point in this journey did Jimmie Rodgers become this sort of like looming figure in your life?
Oh, he's almost like a shadow. He's a looming shadow is what he's turned out to be. We actually had a conversation a while ago. Like, I realized that I was. I love songwriting, but I was trying to think of ways to write songs to sort of forget about the structure of songs. And I realized that whenever I had either written or sung a song that was a narrative song about a person, I was not so aware of structure, like choruses and verses. And I was just sort of thinking, it'd be good to like take a break from kind of structured songwriting and just do something that was looser. And that's when I heard a version, a song that was unreleased in Jimmie's lifetime, where he's playing with a really great blues guitar player from St. Louis named Clifford Gibson. They recorded for the same label, and they were both in Louisville for a series of recording sessions. And I knew Jimmie's story. I loved his music. I knew he was kind of bedrock to a lot of people I liked. And it was not unusual for Jimmie to record with black musicians. I knew that blues was really his favorite music, and he had done a session with Louis Armstrong. But Clifford Gibson, he played like the early great blues guitar players like Lonnie Johnson and the people who followed him, Robert Johnson, Big Bill Brunzi. He was just a really great guitar player who was playing in an open tuning. And the way Clifford played was it didn't really play like a boogie line or anything like that. It was more kind of ethereal, where the beat was suggested rather than played. Almost, I mean, it's certainly not like Mark Rebo, but it had things that were just, it was someone whose internal rhythm clock was like incredibly strong. So to hear that kind of guitar playing, like what you would imagine, say, Robert Johnson would do a few years later with Jimmie's voice, I just thought, who is this guy? And I thought about it for a really long time, almost, over 10 years. I thought, how I would want to write about Jimmie. And I thought I would write songs that sounded like the music he would have heard at the time. A little bit of what Duke Ellington was doing at that time. And, Gershwin, there's so much beautiful music from the late 1920s, early 30s. So that's how I started. And then once I was done, I started to think that maybe there was more to do, and I really hesitated writing a novel. I wrote a novel called Meridian Rising as well. And
the album Meridian Rising was the first thought experiment of what would he be hearing Sawas. And that was 10 years ago?
It was 10 years ago, yeah. And the idea was to write from his point of view, write about his adventures. He's an interesting guy. He was a very bright guy, funny guy. Because I live in Nashville, the Country Music Hall of Fame, I'm lucky to have the Country Music Hall of Fame, which has a lot of letters by him and people writing about knowing him. And he just seemed like a very bright, very funny guy whose dream it was to be an entertainer. And so it was the songs kind of followed the arc of his life. And I was able to put in quite a lot of things that were true to him, but I wasn't trying to write a biography so much as almost like a play. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot of fun because I had never written for brass and strings before. So there was some strings. I don't write music, but working with string players or working with brass players, working with a couple of people from the Nashville Symphony, that is a gas. I mean, I don't know if you've ever worked with symphony players.
No, never.
It's wonderful because they're just so great, And so if you don't write music, but you can sing the melody, they can instantly play it. And the sound that comes from an orchestra player whose focus is cello or his focus is an oboe, the amount of sound that comes out of them is like a human Marshall amp. They're just so strong. It's really exciting. That was, so writing the songs was a lot of fun. And I didn't think that I would keep writing about him. I would hope that maybe somebody else would do it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you think you kind of were done? And it sounds like you were in 2016 or whenever that album came out.
Well, I thought I was. And then a funny thing happened. There was Chris, forgive me, how do you pronounce his last name, who started Arhoolie Records?
Strakowitz?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when he passed away, some of the interviews that he had done came back into circulation. And there was an interview with Howlin' Wolf that had never been fully transcribed. And it got fully transcribed and put on the web. And in that, Howlin' Wolf said that he knew Jimmie Rodgers and that he used to come see Jimmie Rodgers play at still called them plantation, like a plantation, a workplace where Howlin' Wolf was working in the hill country in eastern Mississippi. And Howlin' Wolf would just sit at his feet and he listened to him play. And they started a friendship and conversation. And they would actually go into the land out where, walk out into the field. And Jimmie would help Howlin' Wolf try to break his voice into a yodel. But at that point, Howlin' Wolf was already a young man and his voice had broken in. And so he said that his yodel turned into his howl. Ooh, the Howlin' Wolf, wolf howl is actually started off as him trying to learn to yodel. And once I heard that, it didn't surprise me, but then it sort of became a missing piece that Jimmie, rumors of him knowing Tommy Johnson or the Mississippi Sheiks, it kind of became much more possible. And, and there's a lot of people who have written about that era and that area of Mississippi, some of them really well, some of them not so well. But I just thought it's kind of, there's still a lot that we don't know. but there was enough like hard facts that was a great jumping off point to write. And I, as I said, I didn't really want to write a novel, but COVID happened and I didn't, I was sort of looking for something to do. I had to be home. And I thought, well, I'll see if a short story comes, or if I'll just sort of, I started to get, as writers do, I had two sort of visions of scenes in the book. And I started just trying to write around those scenes, and his voice just kind of burst forward.
Is this your first book of this length?
Yeah, I've never written a book. I've never published a short story.
Okay.
Yeah. And
you're such a creative guy. I was like doubting myself. Like, did something come before this? But no.
No, I was doubting myself long before you did. I didn't. I mean, I love to write, and I'm a good writer, but I didn't. It's a total. I had no idea. I didn't know if I would finish it. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't have an outline. I didn't. And when I finished it, I had no idea that it would be published, and it got published relatively quickly too.
So yeah, Meridian Rising, the book is, and I started it, and I'm knee deep in it and loving it. It's a historical novel, like a historical. Sort of like when Mark Twain's memoir came out after Mark Twain had died, maybe. It's sort of like if Jimmie Rodgers wrote his life story.
Right.
Through you.
It's an imagined memoir of Jimmie from his point of view, told in the last days of his life. For country music fans, Jimmie's story is so, kind of perfect in the sense that he went to New York City to record, and he died the day after his last session. So this is, the story is partly him telling his story, sort of looking back and living in the now, knowing that his life is quickly dwindling. He was dying of tuberculosis, common ailment of the time. And then every other chapter is a mysterious figure interviewing people who knew Jimmie. And at the end, the story that Jimmie is telling and the story that people are reflecting on years after Jimmie's death, they sort of come together in a revelation at the very end of who this narrator is. And to me, that it's not, I didn't think of it as historical in a way. I thought of it as kind of an Americana on the road. It's like Jimmie is talking about the joys of meeting a lot of people and having a lot of crazy circumstances, which is what musicians who travel have to deal with. And in the case of the imagined interviews, those are, in a way, those are kind of like the viewpoint of the people who don't travel with Jimmie. What it's like to observe musicians, and what it's like to sort of be in that life, but always be somewhat separate from it. And both, to me, it was, I think, what made it easy for me, with all the things you can doubt yourself when you're trying to write anything, whether it's a book or an article for Fretboard Journal, is that I was just able to get lost in it. For instance, there's I imagine an interview with H.C. Spear, who's a fantastic character. H.C. Spear was a white man who set up a music store on Ferris Street in Jackson, Mississippi, which is still, the store's not there, but the street is still there. And Ferris Street was a bustling Black business section of Jackson, Mississippi. And H.C. Spear had just loved the music. He loved the musicians. And he decided in the late 1920s to buy a recording contraption, which I still don't know. I think I know what it was. It was called a speakerphone, and it recorded to aluminum discs. But his place kind of became a center for musicians. He recorded Charlie Patton, Son House, Bucko White, Skip James. He auditioned Robert Johnson. He auditioned Jimmie Rodgers. Uncle Dave Macon came through his shop. Pretty much, it was like one of the, if you went to Jackson, it was a center for musicians. And if you wanted to try to get into the record business, he was a record scout. So interviewing him and, trying to get him, me through his voice, trying to talk about how he recorded people, what his attitude was about the music, and just the goings on of like how you actually record two people. You have to think about an accordion could be louder than the guitar, but what if the guitar player's voice is louder, than the accordion? You have to think about all that balance stuff. And so it gave me a chance to talk about the things that I love and try to be creative with them. And I'm glad it's done and behind me, but while I was in it, not knowing what would happen, I really had fun trying to figure it out.
I mean, to write a novel loosely based around people you may have met along the way or your childhood hometown or something like that seems hard enough where you're inventing the whole book. Right. But you tried to stay so true that it sort of blurs the line of like, well, I think these interviews could have actually happened. And I imagine on your end, you had to be like almost a method actor and just live and breathe Jimmie Rodgers for what sounds like maybe years.
Well, it sounds like it would be hard, but in a way, each section gave me a chance to focus on him. Like Jimmie was a vague enough person. I mean, he did really exist. I had lots of facts about him. I in the process, I found out what kind of cigarettes he liked to smoke, and I knew what kind of guitar he liked to play.
What kind of? Hey, let's pause there. It's the Fretboard Journal. What guitar did he like to play?
He had a famous guitar with his name on it. It said "Thanks" on the back. He went to Martin Guitars and had that specifically made. And he had a couple other guitars from the Weymouth Company. But his favorite guitar, or at least what has been by someone who recorded with him, they said that the best sounding guitar that he used is the one he used for all of his sessions, which is in the Country Music Hall of Fame. And it was the plain, is it 0018 maybe? Nothing fancy about it, but it's, they said that guitar sounded much better than all of his other guitars. And that's what he used in Bristol when he got discovered.
Okay.
I'll send a picture of it for you. And, I think to your question, did I live and breathe him? I thought about him a lot, but he reminded me so much of people I've known, if you're lucky to live a longish life, you just know all kinds of characters, people who are exciting to be with, but wear you out. Yeah. Or really funny people that have an energy to them, like, religious figures of lore must have had this thing. There's sure. Like everybody who we know is successful in music. They're like a little off, but some of them are also really exciting to be with because when you meet them, they're just really on. They've got something. So. And in a way, a lot of the books that I grew up loving, say, authors like J.D. Salinger or modern authors like George Saunders, or, they've all got characters that have that extraness to them. Mm-hmm. So, luckily, he's just out of reach, because he lived so, I was born in the 60s. He died in the 30s. So I can't get that close, I can kind of look and imagine, I let my imagination go, but I was not his biographer. So I didn't have to worry about getting things exactly right. Mm-hmm.
In his cut too short life, were there pockets of, his life, were there pockets where you were like, I wish I could find more information and I'm just going to have to wing it?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it was minor stuff, which a lot of the things, to answer your question, yes, definitely. And it made me feel like I had made the right move to not be a biographer. Because there are just gaps in like, how did he get to this place? Or how did he, for instance, this is very small, but there's the story that's been told is that he recorded in Bristol at the same session as the Carter family. He moved to Washington, D.C., and he got frustrated at not having a call back from Ralph Peer, who became one of the preeminent publishers of the 20th century. And so he drove himself up to New York. He checked himself into the most expensive hotel in Times Square and called up Ralph Peer and said, "Hey, I happen to be in New York, and would you like to do a session?" And that Ralph Peer said, "Sure," and gave him a hotel room. And then 2 days later, he recorded Tea for Texas, which became one of the first great bona fide hits of the 20th century. Not the first, but a nationwide known song. And that started his career. It started more hits and royalties and all this stuff. So I'm thinking now, I was like, well, that's a great story. And I thought, well, wait a second. Like, how did he just show up in New York and have a recording session 2 days later? I mean, who can do that? I mean, because the label he recorded for, they were recording everyone from, Caruso was gone at that time, but like Duke Ellington and Fats Waller and classical music. And he was he was thought of as a hillbilly artist.
Yeah.
They weren't going to just drop everything and have him. And so then I also thought, well, RCA was not located in New York at that time. They were located in Camden, New Jersey, which is a much shorter drive from Washington. So I thought, well, this story doesn't make any sense. Like, how did that really happen? And I couldn't find that out. Another time I heard two different stories. I heard one story that he recorded with the Mississippi Sheiks or that he performed with the Mississippi Sheiks and took them through the lobby of a segregated hotel and up to the rooftop to do a performance, which is a great story, and that Jimmie was a star and he could care less about segregation laws. But then I heard the very same story, and that it was Tommy Johnson, that he had heard Tommy Johnson playing on the street, and that he thought, well, hey, I'm doing a show. Why don't you come play with me? Now, they're both great ideas to think of Jimmie and Tommy playing together, or Jimmie and Mississippi Sheiks playing together. But sometimes these would come from researchers. And some of the researchers who delve into this stuff, they hate each other because there's so much competition and so much thought of who's getting more credit, who's not getting enough credit. And it's like academics, the fruits are finite. And so who gets credited for the spoils of telling the story is so I had some fun with that too. I had some times where I had one character say, this is really what happened. And in a way I did it hoping that the researchers who read it would get up in arms and give you a hard time. So,
music aside, what you outlined there is sort of his, and clearly why you love studying him, is he's sort of this Forrest Gumpy character who just sort of either through curiosity or tenacity or whatever shows up in all these kind of random but cool places.
It's true. And he was also recording at a time when labels traveled to record people. So he had one session, an amazing session, for instance, in Louisville, which could be its own short story, where his label, RCA Victor, one of the big labels at the time, both one of the technically really great sounding labels and also one of the busiest, they set up in Louisville for, I think, 2 weeks. Jimmie recorded with two Black artists during that time, and he also recorded with the Carter family and a Hawaiian guitar player, Joe Kaipo, K-I-P-O. So he just did this amazingly diverse group of recordings. And he is given credit for Western swing and blues and jazz. But it's also hand in hand with that is that Jimmie was partying so much, and he was unwell, and he was traveling so much. He was a really honest, hard worker, but he was trying to get the most out of life. And he was a very creative person, but I don't think he was a songwriter necessarily like songwriters we know who are writing all the time. You think of Loretta Lynn or Bob Dylan from our generation as just writing all the time. Steve Earle, they got songs spilling out of their pockets. I don't think Jimmie was that kind of songwriter. So I think a lot of what he's given credit for kind of happened by necessity, where he'd come to a session, he'd tell his producer, "Oh, I got a dozen songs I'm ready to record." knowing that he'd be paid quite a lot of money for each song he recorded. And he'd show up and he didn't have anything. And so he and his producer, and I think they were genuine friends, but they would sort of go through the scraps of things he half remembered and things that he had started writing. And so they developed this catalog that was extremely wide. If you were to take even 20 Jimmie Rodgers songs, there'd be a quarter of them would be by himself. You'd have Louis Armstrong, you'd have the Louisville, Kentucky Jug Band, you'd have Clifford Gibson, you'd have the Carter Family, you'd have Hawaiian guitar players. There's a few songs with strings and a jazz band. And so he was, he was kind of that Zelig character who showed up. In fact, he, one of the great radio personalities at the time, who's kind of been lost to time, was a guy named Will Rogers, who was a comedian and was extremely popular. He wrote for the newspaper chain, a chain of newspapers, and he also had a radio show. And Jimmie toured with him on a fundraising tour of the Mid-South for drought victims. So he was I kind of take it like one of the reasons why he stayed so busy is that if he had something to look forward to, he had something to live for. And I know a lot of musicians like that who, if they're on tour, they're extremely happy because they're making money and they're playing music. And then all of a sudden, as you know, the tours stop and they don't know if they're going to get another phone call. Yeah. And that's a real worry for people who make their living playing music. Because if you're not on tour, then you're not available for a session. Yeah. And so, you worry about the calls that you can't answer or that the opportunities that you can't make. Because musicians get stuff wrong so often. And they'll say, well, isn't he out of town? Isn't he on tour? But actually that person's been home for months waiting for a phone call. So sure. I think a lot of Jimmie's energy came from just trying to outrun death.
Yeah. You mentioned this was, at least at the beginning, a COVID project. How long did it take you to write the whole book?
I don't really know. I thought about it I did some research over a period of months and then walked in circles, doing kind of the same 2 chapters over and over again. I think once I got writing, all in all, it took a year, but once I got going, it went pretty fast, but it took a while to figure out what his voice was. I had read a lot of writers pick a certain time of day to just go and work a couple hours. And so that's what I would do. I would do, say, 2 or 3 hours in the morning and then walk away from it and not worry about it. But after you do that every day, you spin your wheels a lot. You get caught in mud, but you're also writing, if you think, okay, I'm just going to write 20 pages. Yep. Double space. Yeah. Until I just can't do it. And some days I'd come back and I wouldn't recognize anything I had written. And other times I would be really excited to come back because I knew I had written good ideas that I could go back over and work again. So it was a lot of, I don't know if I did every day, but I tried to just do a couple hours every day. And after a while, the speed at which I was working got faster and faster as I knew what I was doing. So it's hard, though. I wouldn't recommend it unless you're just not going to listen to anyone's advice.
That's how all the great pieces of art come out. People ignoring the advice.
Yeah. If you want to be a writer, ignore my advice.
A biography on Jimmie Rodgers in 2025 would probably be a hard enough sell. How did you find a publisher who understood what you're going for and were like, let's bring it on?
Well, it's funny. I had faith that it was okay. Right. Yeah. Just that I liked it, that I still liked reading parts of it, which that sounds, self-important, but you should like what you did. You should just think, well, I would enjoy listening to this or reading this as much as anything else. At first, the Country Music Hall of Fame was interested in it, but they don't do fiction. And then Paul Kingsbury, who was their main person, who was very nice, very supportive of the book, and I hadn't really let anybody read it. He gave me a list of like small presses, and I just went down. I was like a kid, trying to find his first job in the summertime. Like, you don't want to hire anybody this summer, do you? I mean, that's kind of how I felt. I was just like shuffle head down, and I got ding, 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 ding. And then the University of Georgia Press, the person, bless her heart, she said, well, that sounds interesting. Send me a chapter. And then she said, send me another one. And then she said, send me the whole thing. And then I haven't really told anybody this, but then a really funny thing happened where I had sent the book to a whole bunch of people, and one of whom was through an author friend of mine who said, send it to such and such a person. And I kind of kept a running list of people I was sending it to, and I would just in a friendly way every 2 or 3 weeks write this person and say, hey, how's it going? Just want to see if you get a chance to read it. I never heard back from them. And eventually I did, and it was someone associated with Michael Connolly, who wrote The Lincoln Lawyer and Bosco, like two of the biggest shows. Yeah. And so through that person, I actually got shopped to the majors, but they said, stay with the independents, stay with the University of Georgia Press, because first of all, they want it, and major presses, this is too much like a work of literature, as opposed to beach romances and stuff. It's like, well, Jimmie's on the beach and there is some romance, but I see what you're.
Not enough steamy sex scenes.
Right. It is a hard sell to write a book about a balding tuberculotic white blues singer from Mississippi. Now it doesn't sound so bad, but at the time it was a hard sell. But bless their hearts, Georgia published it. So it wasn't so hard, but I feel extremely lucky that every stage of it, just the idea, knowing that it was an idea that I had to spend some time kind of thinking about. With music, you can see the curvature of an album go straight down pretty quickly, in the world of sales, music doesn't really exist anymore. But I have no idea what will happen. Books have a way of flying on their own, so we'll see what happens.
And the book we're talking in early November. The book is out.
The book is out. It came out September 1st.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also coming out this year, you got a record. Like, I don't know when you're finding all the time to do all this stuff, but.
I actually recorded the record really fast. We had a new record out called Cry Love.
Yeah.
Which is co-produced with my longtime friends, Dennis Crouch, incredible upright bass player, and Fats Kaplan, who last year toured with Mitski and has many years with Jack Wyatt and John Prine. And these two guys are the kind of the cornerstone of my group, the WPA Ball Club, which we all started playing together in the honky tonks a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
And I always forget this, but one of the things that led me to write the book is we saw each other quite a bit over COVID. And then we recorded a whole bunch of material and recorded a record really fast. It was as pleasant a sessions as I've ever had. And we recorded in my studio. I have a 1-inch 8-track MCI machine. And we recorded live, and it just it flowed. It was really easy. And then I went to mix it, and my tape machine kind of flew the coop. It was having some trouble, and I couldn't. The person who's worked on it for years sort of disappeared, so I couldn't work on the record. So I thought, well, I'll try to write a book. So, and once the book was done, the machine got fixed, and so they both ended up coming out at the same time. But they're both a record of these last 4 years. Since it was edited over the last year, but these first 3.5 years of this decade that have been, much like a Jimmie Rodgers life, a lot of tough times for me personally, and just all of our friends, and anxiousness. that's kind of in the book too. There's some points where even Jimmie's nurse who's with him is wearing a mask, and a lot of my friends, especially the ones who make their living touring, it's been a really hard few years. Some of them didn't know if they'd go back on the road. Some of them haven't. Some, it really aggravated things. Some of them are no longer here, so it's, I think in a way, whereas the songs were a pleasure to write from a songwriter's point of view, the book kind of became kind of a celebration and also a defense of the artistic life, what it means to be creative and connect with people, and how that can't really be, you can't, you can make money from that, but it's not something you can easily monetize. And, I was conscious also, just because I love to make records, that the ability to make records is still there, but the little bit of funding and all that kind of stuff really disappeared. And, now everyone is their own independent label, but I was sorry to see all that go, as crooked as it was. It was nice to have a community. It was nice to be on a label and not doing everything yourself. Mm-hmm. And also with the idea that there was a actual market out there of people who wanted music that was associated with a group of people, whether it's a label in Chicago or New York or the Carolinas or something. And the music business sold itself out for pennies. It's just they didn't protect their assets, so to speak. And so now it's, there's no less great music being made. There's lots of great music being made, but the loss of that infrastructure means you don't have people who are producing every day, or art directing every day. And to be really good at what you do, you got to do it every day. You have to love it. And there's a lot of great music made today that maybe is only half as great as it could be if there was more of a not teacher pupil, but more of some kind of hierarchy to go through. You're constantly being pushed to really get to the root of what you're doing. It's not that, there are always people doing that, but around Nashville, I've seen that there's, I'm just more in touch with musicians who are in a crisis of one kind or another. And so, yeah.
It must be so weird for you, because I'm sure you have a whole wide array of friends, some of whom are playing for like modern country and doing all the sessions. And then here you are in the world of Jimmie Rodgers. You've created this universe unto yourself where you're like, hopefully a little immune from the quirks of Nashville. Well, maybe not. Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe. It's, I'm more, it's like Jimmie lives in the book. When I open the book, he's there, but he's not over, I'm not, I still can't really tell one song from another until he starts singing, because they all kind of sound the same. Sure. In a way that kind of, I mean that lovingly, but I like him, but I'm not, it's more that era, it's all of the people who worked back then. They're not quite in focus. They're a little bit out of reach.
Yeah.
Jimmie was kind of my way of stepping into that world and trying to make it seem modern, because to me, it doesn't seem that far away. We have people out of work. We have, a government that's absent, whatever it is that you believe, nothing is working right now. And to a great degree, when Jimmie was who he was and living in that time, it was the same, it's the same issue, and, there was a depression, and certainly there may not be an economic depression yet, but this country is depressed. So it's hard to write about that, to write about that feeling of malaise and distrust, and just like, when is it going to feel good to get up in the morning again? So that's the thing I focus on. I don't really focus on Jimmie so much. It's just that I wouldn't say proxy, but it became a way to speak about just life and how we all speak about it. If you're having a beer, just sitting around the dinner table, you're kind of measuring your own malaise against somebody else and trying to climb up a little bit out of your funk. And Jimmie in the book is dying, but he's also always working and always planning and always trying to live as much as he can.
Yeah.
And that seems modern to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you just got me thinking, like, if Jimmie Rodgers were around today, he'd probably be doing all the collabs and on TikTok and doing all the things.
He would be doing every fucking thing he can. Pardon my French, he would. Whereas, like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll just trust that something nice will happen if I like people of my ilk. Maybe, you interview a lot of people of my ilk, but I think everyone's just trying, like, if you have a seat at the table, sort of being able to do an interview and being able to talk to people, you want to keep that seat. So I'm of the feeling, like, how do I keep that seat? I do work. I call all these people like you who talk about work. And if you think the work is worthy to talk about, I get to talk about it. So I sort of feel like I've got my seat, but I don't believe that there's any business to really fight for anymore. What you have to fight for is your avenue to put out your work.
Yeah.
Right. So that's something I'll fight for, and with something like Fretboard Journal, which I actually read, and love and have been a fan of for so long. It's like, it's an honor, but it's also like, that's a relationship, and, but Jimmie would do all of that stuff that I don't want to do.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Social media and all that. It's like, you go for it. So that, like, if you were to say, like, how am I not like him? 1,000 ways. Yeah. One of which is I'm not doing that. No.
You're not magically appearing in New York overnight to go try and knock on a door.
Not Phil Collins playing with Led Zeppelin one night and Genesis the next night. No, it's not.
I don't want to undersell Cry Love because it's really beautiful and it's great. When did you record that? And was that a big process? And I feel like every time you record, you kind of like capture the vintage vibe, which, for lack of a better word. So I'm just kind of curious.
Because our equipment's old.
Okay, well,
I engineer my records simply because I can't afford an engineer, but I have a lot of friends who have given me. I learned a lot from Mark Nevers, who recorded a lot of Lamb Chop records. There's a engineer and mastering. Engineer and musician here named George Bradfute, who's done records for Phil Lee and Richard Bennett. There's also a wonderful guy named Buster Allen, who I've learned a lot from, who just does a lot of really great work and was Garth Brooks' engineer for many, many years. So I have lots of help. Mm-hmm. But the record was pretty easy to write. It was really about, it was positive and kind of bittersweet record, I guess. Some personal losses and some friends of mine had losses, but it was so much fun just to get back with the band and play.
Yeah.
We record without headphones, record to a tape machine. I have the remote right next to me. Typically what we do is drums, upright bass, and me on guitar, maybe one other person. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not singing live, but I'm singing into the room so they can feel what I'm doing, get a sense of what I'm doing. And usually we do first or second takes. Everything on the record was like a first or second take. And I drive around and listen to what we did and pick the take and sing over it. And then often Fats Kaplan, we talk about what kind of color, what seems good to it if he hasn't played live on it. It's a very strong rhythm background to listen to. And we have a wonderful piano player named Heather Mulder, who's played with us for many years, also a great letterpress artist. But we play together a lot. We have a monthly show at Brown's Diner here in Nashville. And those sets are often like our recording sessions, like very loose. We might do Mercy Mercy by Don Covey, and then we might do an old folk song like Cluck Old Hen. It's a really wide group of songs that we choose from, and I love them because they're just loose. They love the same music I do, so we can do 30 minutes of a very wide, diverse group of covers, and then do all my songs, songs we haven't done in a long time. I think the newest member of the band has been with us for 10 years, and the oldest member of the band playing with me since the mid 1990s. So that's a long time. Yeah. We've kind of become a version of all the things that we like. We love Los Lobos. We love NRBQ, those bands that don't seem like they have a set list. So recording is really, a lot of it was recorded maybe a year before it came out, but there were some things that we did or just a few months ago, really, before it was finished. But it's, it was I had to do a lot of hard living to write it, but it's actually a very, it's just a sweet record. I think it's just a rockin' little sweet record. I'm sure it's like an ink blot test. I won't understand it for some time to come, but it's easy to make, easy to mix too. There's not much fluff on it. There's nothing very forced about it. It's, and as I said, some of the songs were just either we did the take once or the first take was the freshest one.
Yeah. It strikes me as coming full circle from when you were talking about your childhood and listening to the radio and all the disparate things. I mean, I think of you, maybe incorrectly, as a singer-songwriter. There were some instrumentals on there.
Yeah. And I'm just writing music. I mean, I write songs. I'm a songwriter. Yeah. And to kind of protect that, I think of things like doing a book or a short story or writing from someone's point of view. Because I love songs so much, but I don't want to get tired I never want to be thinking that a song needs a bridge or that even a song needs a title. I would love to just be in the fever of creating. And I think, writing the book was in a way a song without words, just like an instrumental is a song without melody,
Yeah.
And kind of that's how I think of it. I didn't think it was like, oh God, I'm writing a book. It's just like, no, I've got something to say, and maybe music isn't the way to say it. So I'll see what happens if I write, if I can just write freely and see if something happens.
Yeah.
And being lost like that is the best. If you can, whatever it is that you do, if you can just be lost in it and not care when it gets done, but just trust that you're enjoying yourself. That's the place to be, that's not a transaction. There's so much in music, especially in a place like Nashville. It's very transactional, not just from a money standpoint, but like you have to play the thing that the audience knows, or you have to talk about this record or this single or what you're doing next, and it's like, I don't want to, I just don't. It's so boring to do that. What are you doing next? Well, Bob, I've got to be lifting an elephant, playing the circus. And I just don't, I'm not like, talking about the process and what I love is great, but like talking about what I'm going to do next that's like a double drag with cheese. So I'd much rather be lost in it. And I'm trying to explain even what was going through my head when I did it, but I don't even know. Like, I don't know how it happened.
Well,
book and I made a record, but it's the kind of just like everyday thing, You just a lot of musicians' life is also not doing anything, which I also really love. John Prine had this quote, and I only met him once. I wish I could have asked him about it to see if it was real. I'm sure it was. He said something like he'd rather walk across the street for a hot dog than to write a song. He was a beautiful songwriter, but there's like, you have to kind of gird yourself, like you have to, I mean, once you're in it, it's wonderful. And if you have a song in your back pocket that no one's heard yet that you're happy with, that's a great feeling.
Yeah.
But as far as avoidance, there is no avoidance strategy does not work with songwriters. They would rather do anything. Like they would rather do I think they'd rather do it. Like if you were making your very first record and you had no idea what you're doing, it's like, oh, that'd be like, I'd be so happy. I was like, I'd give you all kinds of advice, tell you what, this, try this, that, this microphone, this guitar, to anything to not think about.
Yes.
Plague of being a creative person.
Yeah. Well, Paul, you are a creative person. I'm not going to ask you what's next. You don't want me to ask you that. But you've had a banner year, and I know it hasn't been easy, but the two works are amazing. So I can't thank you enough for sharing them with the world.
Yeah, I will say that when I was writing the book, I got the machine fixed and was trying to mix the music, and I really couldn't hear music very well. Like I couldn't really mix the record while I was writing. It was as if my muse had said, I'm out of here. You got to write a book. Forget it. I'm going to the beach. Call me when you're done. And once the book was all done and edited, and I went back to mixing the record, I was like fearing it wouldn't. It's like it was easy. It was like, this sounds fine. Mixes itself. But the two things were at war with each other at one point, where like I couldn't really hear music clearly while the book was going on. So I'm kind of glad to be back with music now.
All right. Welcome back.
Yeah. I don't know if I will write another one. If I get an idea, I would, but I'll be prepared that I can't do both at the same time. That would be, they're coming out at the same time, but they were not done at the same time.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I sure appreciate you.
All right. That was my conversation with Paul Burch. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out the book. It's great. I'm halfway through it right now. Check out some of the music we referenced. And thanks as always for being a part of the Fretboard Journal and all that we do.